You wake up every day chasing something that never seems to stay. More work, more hours, more pressure, and still, it feels like freedom keeps slipping further away. You tell yourself that once you make enough, you'll finally relax. But deep down, you know that peace never comes from numbers, it comes from belief. What if the real reason you're stuck isn't about money at all, but the story you've been telling yourself about it? Today, we challenge that story. He had spent years chasing the same dream everyone talked about, financial freedom. Waking before sunrise, working late into the night, always pushing harder. He believed that the harder he worked, the closer he'd get to peace. But peace never came. The money grew, yes, but so did the pressure. Every deposit into his account felt temporary, like a momentary sigh before the next storm. He didn't realize that his real struggle wasn't against the world, but against his own belief about what money meant. Each morning started the same. The alarm, the emails, the coffee that tasted more like fuel than comfort. He told himself he was building a better future, yet he never paused long enough to feel the present. When he finally took a breath, silence felt foreign. His thoughts filled the room. What if it all disappears? What if success isn't enough? That quiet question stayed with him, echoing louder than any motivational quote he had ever read. He wasn't poor, but he wasn't free either. His success had turned into a performance he couldn't stop playing. The more he achieved, the more he feared losing it. His friends admired his drive. His co-workers envied his numbers. But inside, he felt like a man standing in quicksand. The harder he moved, the faster he sank. The anxiety wasn't about money itself. It was about his identity being tied to it. One afternoon, he found himself sitting across from an old mentor, a man who had once built a fortune and later walked away from it. The mentor listened quietly as he vented about stress, goals, and the constant fear of falling behind. Then the old man asked a question that pierced through the noise. When did you start believing that peace had to be earned? The question froze him. He had no answer. He realized he had never seen money as a tool, he saw it as proof of worth. That moment marked the beginning of change, though he didn't know it yet. He began noticing how his thoughts shaped his choices, how fear disguised itself as ambition. He saw how every goal was rooted in a quiet need to escape insecurity, not to build joy. It was subtle, invisible, but powerful. His life wasn't being controlled by money, it was being controlled by what he believed about money. Days turned into weeks. He still worked hard, but he started asking different questions. What am I really chasing? What would I do if I wasn't afraid? For the first time, he realized that freedom wasn't a number in a bank account. It was a state of mind. The pursuit of wealth without inner balance was like pouring water into a leaking cup. One night, he sat alone, lights dim, laptop closed. He remembered the younger version of himself, the one who believed success would fix everything. That version had been wrong but not foolish. He was just following what everyone else believed too. The lie that peace comes after achievement. The truth was simpler, quieter, and more difficult to accept. Peace had to come first. He didn't quit his job. He didn't sell his possessions or disappear from the city. What changed was invisible to others but monumental to him. He stopped letting fear dictate his drive. He began to work from curiosity, not anxiety. To spend from intention, not impulse. Slowly the grip loosened. The constant buzz of pressure softened into something lighter, clarity. He started to notice how much energy he had wasted chasing a feeling that money could never buy. That realization didn't make him less ambitious. It made him wiser. He learned that real wealth begins the moment you stop running from fear and start walking with purpose. It wasn't about abandoning ambition, it was about realigning it. And so, his journey didn't end with a massive breakthrough or sudden fortune. It began with a pause. A still moment where he finally understood that the freedom he wanted was already within reach. All it needed was belief. Not the belief that he had to earn peace, but that he could create it, right here, right now. She had always believed that being broke was her biggest problem. Every time her bank balance dipped, she felt the weight of failure pressing on her chest. It wasn't just about money, it was about what money represented. Safety. Worth. Belonging. Each paycheck was a temporary breath before she sank back into anxiety. She told herself, once I earn more, I'll finally be free. But that freedom never came. The more she earned, the more trapped she felt. Her life was a cycle of survival disguised as ambition. Then came the morning that changed everything. She had just walked out of another interview, another polite rejection wrapped in professional language. Sitting on a park bench, she felt that familiar mix of disappointment and exhaustion. Around her, people rushed to work, clutching coffee cups like lifelines. She stared at them, wondering if they all felt the same quiet fear she did. That's when she caught herself whispering something under her breath. Maybe I'm just not meant to be rich. The words froze her. It wasn't the world holding her back. It was her belief. That moment hit her harder than any rejection letter. She realized she had built her life around the idea that wealth was something other people had. Somewhere deep inside, she had accepted the story that she was destined to struggle. And because she believed it, she kept finding proof of it. Bad breaks, missed chances, small wins that never lasted. Her mind had turned into a filter that only saw limitation. It wasn't money she lacked. It was belief. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, notebook open, determined to understand. She wrote down every thought she had about money. Each sentence revealed something painful. Money is hard to get. Rich people are lucky. If I want more, I'll lose my peace. Seeing those words written out was like meeting her fears face to face. She realized her relationship with money wasn't about numbers. It was emotional, deeply personal. It was built from years of listening to others' fears and mistaking them for truth. From that day forward, she made a silent promise to rewrite her money story. She didn't start by changing her job or her budget. She started by changing her language. She replaced "I can't afford this" with "How can I make this possible?" It seemed small, almost trivial, but those words began to shift something inside her. The more she practiced, the more she noticed opportunities she had once ignored. Her attention started to move from fear to possibility. That was the real beginning of her freedom. It wasn't easy. Some days doubt crept back in. Some nights she stared at her bills and felt the old panic return. But this time she didn't run from it. She breathed through it. She reminded herself that fear didn't define her future. Each time she caught a limiting thought, she challenged it. What if I can? Those words became her anchor. Months later, she landed a job that not only paid better but aligned with her skills and values. She began saving, not from guilt but from confidence. She invested, not because she feared scarcity but because she believed in growth. Her outer world started reflecting her inner transformation. People around her noticed the change. Her voice was calmer, her choices clearer. She wasn't chasing wealth anymore. She was attracting it through clarity and self-trust. Looking back, she realized that the belief she had to change wasn't about money, it was about herself. She had been waiting for proof before she allowed herself to believe. But the proof only came after the belief. Money didn't give her worth. Her worth created the space for money to flow in. That understanding shifted everything. Her story became a quiet reminder for anyone still stuck in that loop of scarcity thinking. The path to financial peace doesn't start with luck or opportunity, it starts with mindset. When she changed her belief, she didn't just attract wealth. She attracted freedom. Not the kind that comes from having more, but the kind that comes from finally knowing she is enough. He had followed every rule. The morning routines, the investment podcasts, the productivity hacks. His calendar was color-coded perfection, his goals neatly written on the wall. He was doing everything right, yet something felt deeply wrong. Every day began with a plan and ended with a quiet sense of failure. The numbers were growing, but the joy was shrinking. He was becoming successful by every metric, except peace. The noise of the world never stopped. One video said to buy assets. Another said to grind harder. Someone else said to quit and chase passion. Every voice claimed to know the secret. He believed that somewhere among those voices was the answer to his anxiety. But the more advice he followed, the more confused he became. It wasn't wealth he was chasing, it was certainty. And that's something money could never give. His days blurred together. Commutes, emails, workouts, endless checklists. He felt productive but hollow. The constant rush became an identity. He couldn't remember the last time he sat in silence without reaching for his phone. He didn't know it yet, but his biggest addiction wasn't work or social media. It was the need to feel like he was progressing. Stillness scared him because it made him face the truth. He didn't trust himself. One evening, after another long day of chasing targets, he sat in his car, engine off, surrounded by city lights. The air was heavy, quiet. For once, he didn't turn on music or check notifications. He just sat there breathing. In that silence, he heard something he hadn't in years, his own thoughts, unfiltered. They were simple, almost childlike. Why am I doing all this? The question lingered in the air. No audience, no performance. Just truth. That question became the turning point. The next morning, he broke his routine. He didn't wake at 5 a.m. He didn't check his metrics or emails. Instead, he went for a walk. No headphones, no distractions. The city was still waking up, streets quiet, sky pale blue. For the first time, he noticed how peaceful it felt to move without a goal. He realized he had built his life around the idea that success required struggle, and that peace could only come after victory. But what if it was the other way around? That thought lingered for days. He started questioning the patterns he once worshipped. Why did he equate busyness with value? Why did silence feel like failure? Slowly, he began stripping away the noise. He started journaling not to track habits but to understand himself. He practiced saying no to things that looked good but felt wrong. It wasn't easy. The pressure to stay ahead never disappeared, it just stopped controlling him. One day, his friend asked him how he managed to look calmer, more grounded. He smiled and said, "I stopped chasing wealth like it was running away from me." The friend laughed, but he meant it. He realized that abundance wasn't something you hunt, it was something you allow. It shows up when your actions align with your values, not your fears. Weeks turned into months. His life didn't slow down completely, but it became balanced. He still worked hard, but now he did it from a place of clarity. He no longer felt the need to prove his worth through results. Money still mattered, but it wasn't his master anymore. It was simply a tool, a resource that amplified the peace he built inside himself. Looking back, he saw how deeply society had shaped his mindset. He was taught to equate movement with progress, speed with success, pressure with purpose. But real wealth wasn't in momentum, it was in meaning. It was in the quiet confidence that you could stop running and still feel complete. His story wasn't one of sudden enlightenment. It was a slow, steady realization that the chase never ends until you decide to stop. The freedom he wanted wasn't waiting at the end of his goals, it was hiding behind his fear of stillness. Once he learned to sit with silence, everything changed. He didn't find more money overnight, but he found something infinitely more valuable: peace of mind. And from that peace, wealth began to flow naturally, effortlessly, like water following gravity. She had spent years building her career, each promotion feeling like another step toward the freedom she had always imagined. The office lights, the long flights, the late-night strategy calls, they were all proof that she was winning. People looked at her and saw success. But beneath the surface, she was exhausted. Her achievements had become chains made of gold. Every milestone brought applause, yet inside she felt the quiet ache of fear, the fear of losing it all. One night, she sat in her apartment overlooking the city skyline. The view was perfect. The silence wasn't. She stared at her reflection in the window, realizing she no longer recognized the person she had become. Everything she had worked for suddenly felt fragile. She wasn't chasing dreams anymore. She was running from the fear of falling behind. Each decision was calculated not by desire, but by anxiety. Her wealth had grown, but her peace had vanished. The moment that changed her came unexpectedly. She met an old friend for coffee, someone she hadn't seen in years. The friend wasn't rich by conventional standards, no luxury car, no designer clothes, but there was something about her presence that radiated calm. She spoke slowly, laughed easily, and seemed completely content. As they talked, the woman found herself asking, "How are you so peaceful when life is so uncertain?" Her friend smiled and said, "Because I stopped trying to buy peace with pressure." That line stayed with her. On the train ride home, she couldn't stop thinking about it. She realized she had spent years trying to earn freedom through control. More money, more plans, more guarantees. But the harder she tried to control life, the more chaotic it felt. Her wealth hadn't protected her from fear. It had amplified it. Because deep down, she didn't trust herself without constant achievement. Over the next few weeks, she began to step back. Not dramatically, not by quitting her job or escaping the city, but by giving herself space to think. She began each morning with quiet instead of emails. She started journaling her thoughts, asking questions she had avoided for years. What am I afraid of? What would I do if money wasn't the point? The answers were uncomfortable at first, but freeing. She realized that her fear of loss had blinded her to the abundance she already had. Slowly, she began to redefine what success meant. It wasn't about earning more, it was about living aligned with peace. She started spending differently, not out of guilt, but out of clarity. She donated more. She took weekends off. She said no to projects that drained her spirit. Her life didn't fall apart. In fact, it became lighter. The more she released control, the more her world seemed to flow naturally. People noticed the change. Her colleagues said she seemed different, calmer, more confident. She smiled more often. Decisions came easier. The irony was that her career began thriving even more once she stopped chasing perfection. She learned that money magnifies who you are, not what you lack. When she was driven by fear, money amplified her insecurity. Now that she led with peace, it amplified her purpose. Months later, sitting in that same apartment, she looked out at the city again. The view hadn't changed, but she had. The skyline no longer felt like a symbol of pressure. It was a reminder of balance. She understood now that wealth wasn't a destination. It was a reflection of how deeply she trusted herself. The world hadn't slowed down, but she had learned how to move calmly within it. Her story became a quiet lesson for others chasing freedom through force. Money can buy comfort, but not peace. Success can fill your schedule, but not your soul. The real work isn't in getting more, it's in releasing the belief that you need more to be whole. She learned that when you stop treating money as a weapon against fear and start seeing it as a partner in purpose, it begins to serve you instead of control you. As she closed her journal one evening, she wrote a single line that summed it all up. The more I let go, the richer I become. And in that moment, she finally felt it, not just the comfort of financial stability, but the quiet joy of inner wealth. A kind of freedom no number could ever buy. He grew up surrounded by quiet struggle. Bills on the kitchen table. Conversations that always ended with, maybe next month. He learned early that money was something to fear. It wasn't a tool, it was a test. Every dollar had to be stretched, protected, and worried over. That belief followed him into adulthood, shaping every decision he made. Even when he began earning more, the fear never left. He saved obsessively, avoided risk, and still felt poor inside. The scarcity didn't live in his bank account, it lived in his mind. Years passed, and on paper he had made it. A stable job, a decent home, no debt. Yet the same anxiety kept whispering in his ear, what if it all disappears? He couldn't relax. Every expense felt dangerous. Every good moment felt temporary. He had achieved stability but lost peace. One evening, sitting alone after work, he looked around his apartment and realized he had everything he once dreamed of. But he wasn't happy. The fear of losing it had stolen the joy of having it. That night, something shifted. He asked himself a question he had avoided for years. When did I decide that money equals survival? He traced that belief back to his childhood, to moments of scarcity and silence, when adults spoke about money like it was an unpredictable storm. He understood, finally, that he wasn't just managing finances, he was managing inherited fear. That fear had turned him into someone who could never feel safe, no matter the numbers on the screen. The next day, he decided to do something different. Not drastic, not reckless, just different. He started small by writing down what money actually meant to him now. He wrote, "Money gives me choice. Money lets me help. Money supports my peace." Those sentences felt strange at first, but repeating them slowly replaced the old story running in his mind. The story that said money was danger. The more he practiced, the lighter he felt. Weeks later, he began changing how he interacted with money. Instead of tracking every expense with fear, he tracked them with curiosity. Instead of saying, "I can't afford that," he asked, "What would it take to afford it?" That simple shift transformed the energy around his finances. He started investing, not because he trusted the market, but because he trusted himself to adapt. The moment he stopped treating money like an enemy, it began working for him. One weekend, he met an old friend who noticed the difference. "You seem calmer," the friend said. He smiled. "I stopped believing money was survival," he replied. "Now it's just a mirror. It reflects how I feel inside." That statement stayed with him long after the conversation ended. It was true. His financial life hadn't magically changed overnight, but his relationship with it had. And that was enough to change everything else. Months turned into a quiet transformation. He began to see wealth not as accumulation but as alignment. The more grateful he felt, the more opportunities seemed to appear. He started a small side project, not to escape his job but to express his creativity. It brought an income, but more importantly, it brought joy. He learned that money wasn't about control. It was about flow. When you trust yourself, it flows through your life like water. When you fear it, it stagnates. Looking back, he saw how much of his life had been shaped by that single hidden belief. The fear that money could vanish, that peace could only exist when everything was perfect. But peace, he realized, wasn't something to earn. It was something to allow. The day he stopped measuring his safety by his balance was the day he became truly wealthy. Now, when he sits at his kitchen table, the same place where his parents once worried, he feels a deep sense of gratitude. Not because he has everything, but because he finally understands enough. The belief that once kept him trapped has turned into wisdom. Money is not survival. Money is energy, a tool, a reflection. And freedom isn't found by controlling it, but by trusting yourself to live with it. His story is a reminder for anyone still living in quiet financial fear. The goal isn't just to earn more. is to heal the story behind why you think you need more. Because when peace and purpose lead the way, money follows naturally. Not out of luck, but alignment. Not out of pressure, but trust. He learned that true wealth begins when fear ends. And from that moment forward, he never chased money again. He simply let it meet him where peace lived.